Hello everyone, and welcome to the Dice Commando YouTube channel. I'm Andrew, with you here as always. This is the Commando Chat, a no-holds-barred, anything-goes videocast about everything and anything gaming related. This video and others like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. Please show your support with a like and subscribe, and be sure to hit the bell notification icon so you don't miss any new videos. If you want to get involved with the channel, consider becoming a channel member. There are many benefits to channel membership, including access to our Discord, exclusive deck tech and strategy videos, and the opportunity to help create channel content. I want to sincerely thank all our channel members, as I truly couldn't do this without your support. You guys rock. Go Commando. Hello everyone, good morning, and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Commando Chat, the anything and everything gaming videocast here on the Dice Commando YouTube channel. I'm Andrew, with you guys here as always. Today I want to discuss an interesting phenomenon in competitive gaming, and we're going to approach this by analyzing me personally as a gamer. So today we're talking about why I'll always be a JV gamer. Hello everyone, and thanks for joining me today. I am very excited to be kicking off this new segment here on the channel. So before we dive into today's discussion, I want to acknowledge that there may be a few out there who interpret today's video as complaining and or attempting to justify my own shortcomings as a gamer. And while admittedly the title speaks to me, it really is just simply a stab at some self-deprecating humor that will tie into today's actual discussion, right? Because the reality is, in fact, I actually believe I'm a good gamer. By no means am I world class, as evidenced by the fact that I have a day job and I'm not doing this professionally, right? But I do consistently find myself at or near top cuts in most events that I attend. And while yes, the closest thing that I have to a world title are my back-to-back tournament wins worldwide for the Stargate TCG Online, way back in like 2007, I think. I've demonstrated across multiple games, multiple platforms, a pretty consistent performance of that, right? So I don't think I'm, completely bad at gaming, right? I'm not a world champion, but I'm not bad at this, right? So instead, today's discussion is really about the consistent gap between tribal or theme builds and what we'll call rule breaker builds, right? So what do I mean by tribal or a theme build, right? Well, we all know that, in a lot of these games, whether it be Star Wars, Star Trek, Marvel, whatever it may be, right? Magic's actually the example that we're going to use because Magic is, Magic's one of the biggest games out there, right? We have what have become actually largely through Magic is, known as the tribal decks, right? So you have a fairy deck, or you might have an elf deck, or a goblin deck, or one of the favorite ones I had lately was my merfolk deck, right? They all of the cards in there, they all are relatively bundled and relatively clear from the start that they're meant to be played together, right? And this is a really good tactic for games to use. It gives a great entry point. It also gives people allegiances to get on board with, and they can ally to people and have friends. And hey, we're all elf players, we're all goblin players, we're all Kithkin players, whatever it may be, right? And then you have the theme type builds as well, depending on the IP that your game is around, right? You may be a Jedi deck, or you may be a Federation deck, or a Klingon deck, or whatever it may be, right? And then you have what are known as kind of what we'll call the rule breaker builds, right? And these are the builds that don't really follow a theme. They don't really follow any sort of pre-made guidelines. What they're really doing is they're using the most efficient. They're going out, they're finding kind of the combos, they're fitting all these various pieces together to make stuff sing and work, right? And a really good example of kind of how the rule breaker decks, if you want to call them that, take things from the various periods. So if we go right now, we look at what's popular in Magic. We have Teferi, Growth Spiral, and Ugin. Right, those guys aren't in any way, related to each other. And you look at one and you don't think, oh, well, there's Teferi. I think Ugin, right? But this is a deck that's tearing up Magic pretty good right now. It's just a ramp deck meant to get him out, and then he's your end game, right? So that's one example that's out there right now. And when we get into talking about this, over ramp or ramp decks is one of the easiest and most common ways that these decks, these rule breakers, commonly break the game, right? As we all know, most of these games function, most of the games that are good function well on some sort of growth curve, right? For Magic, for example, it's one land per turn, right? So turn 1 you have 1 mana, turn 2 you have 2 resources, turn 3 you have 3 resources, turn 4, and so on, right? And these ramp decks, or an over ramp deck which does it better, are meant to basically break out of that growth curve. And historically, I mean, across all the various games I've played, right, historically these Rulebreaker decks generally somehow abuse that growth curve, right? So I'm actually going to go back, way back to the beginnings of Magic, right, and look at Llanowar Elves, right? So Llanowar Elves is tap 1 green mana, it's a creature that you can put in for 1, and then you can tap that creature to add that green mana the next turn, right? So in this case, by turn 2, following the normal land drop curve, you would have 2 resources, but because you have this guy in play, now you have 3, right? So you're breaking that curve and you're accelerating your resource. And what this, because that was really kind of Green's identity, right? And kind of historically has been. Green's identity really is, we have all these big creatures, but we need some way to help us get them into play faster, otherwise we just get stomped down. What I have here is I'm comparing Shivan Dragon, which is 6, to Force of Nature, which is 6, right? Shivan Dragon, even though he is lower in terms of actual power, he's a 5/5 versus Force of Nature, if you actually compare them, right, Shivan Dragon's probably maybe a better guy because he comes in with that flying, right? But the point is that Green specifically, right, you look at the number of mana symbols in there, because of Green's ramp curve, the green characters cost a little more green mana, right? So inherently, Green in its identity is designed such that, yes, it's basically designed for ramp and they account for that. Whereas in other colors, for example, like the Shivan Dragon, it's not necessarily meant to be ramped into, whereas Force of Nature would be, right? And again, these two are very old cards, and things have changed a lot in the 20, 30 years since that's happened. But I think you get the point of what I'm going for, right, is that if you stay within the intended build, it works well because it's designed that way. And that's where then we start getting into kind of the cross problems in the Rulebreakers deck. So again, now I have a more updated version of Llanowar Elves here, but then I have Paradise Druid, right? Paradise Druid, add 1 mana of any color, right? So yes, it costs more. But what you're doing here is you are now bringing other colors to the table, right? So now this ramp character can help you ramp other colors as well. And then you look at a Cultivate, for example, which is a fantastic, amazing card. Search your library for up to 2 basic lands of any color, right? So now Cultivate can actually help you play 3 color decks or build towards a 5 color deck or whatever, right? Which allows you then to bring in more and more stuff from outside said faction identity, if you want to call it that, right? And that's how those rule breakers start pushing things. They can bring in, stuff that wasn't really designed to be played together necessarily, and they start just kind of pushing the limits of the game, right? So I've been playing these games for a long time, since middle school, right? Now, of course, in middle school I didn't really get it, right? But ever since that, switch flipped sometime early high school, I've noticed that this is just the way it is, right? I've played a lot of these games, different types, different IPs. Every game has this, where the rule breaker decks will naturally be better than your tribal decks, right? It's inherent to the DNA of these types of games, right? Things designed within the parameters of the game will always be disadvantaged to things that aren't held to those same rules. I mean, that's just inherently makes sense, right? That's not to say that an elf or a goblin or an angel deck can't be good, but rarely is that type of deck the best one in the format, right? And this isn't, I mean, obviously we're speaking mostly toward card games right now just because that's more what I'm familiar with, but Legion actually had a very similar problem, right? When Legion came out, snipers were very strong, and they were very much pushing the limits of, the fundamentals of the game weren't accounted to have your units under pressure from the start, right? So Legion has done point balances. They've made some fundamental changes to try and fix, or they had already done that to fix how the snipers work, right? So what we see constantly through all these games is what ends up being good, what ends up being the best, what ends up being dominant, are stuff that really push the inherent fundamentals of the game itself. So here's where we come to this discussion about me and, kind of through my preferences, right? I'm naturally held back from being a top tier player because of what I enjoy doing. I enjoy playing the theme decks, right? I want to play my Jedi. I want to play my favorite characters. I will enjoy playing the tribal decks, right? Now, yes, that is a personal choice of mine, and I recognize that in order to take that next step, you need to get away from that, right? But that's what I'm saying is because as a gamer, I am sitting down to do what I enjoy, which is play this. I enjoy the natural synergies, but I'm naturally going to be held back from a better tech, right? It's not even at some point. At some point, it becomes outside of my ability to play, and I'm held back by just getting out teched, right? So, and again, I know what you're thinking right now. But no, it's not just that I'm a bad deck builder. That I actually think I'm a good deck builder. It's just what I enjoy playing, right? It's when I sit down and I want to play one of these games, I'm doing so for relaxing and enjoyment. It doesn't mean I don't know how to build a deck. It doesn't mean I can't see these combos and pull them off. It's just my personal choice on enjoyment. And yes, I do realize what comes from that, right? So where I'm going here with this is, playing one's favorite characters or playing a theme-based deck will generally not yield the same results as playing one of these Rulebreaker decks, right? And again, that's a person's desire and choice. But as players, right, to be competitive and kind of have that top-tier performance, we have to move beyond the fun of these natural theme and natural synergy decks, right? And oftentimes this means moving away from what attracts us to the game in the first place, right? I mean, how many people have been brought to a game because it's Star Wars? How many people have been brought to a game because it's Marvel? And you're like, oh man, I really like Iron Man, or man, I really like playing Jedi, or man, Darth Vader is just the awesome. I want to play Darth Vader. And then what ends up winning or being top tier competitive in those decks has nothing to do with the show or the IP. It's just a couple random guys who were in the background one time for 3 minutes, and they're all on a team together, and they're winning, right? I mean, obviously I'm speaking, kind of to Star Wars Destiny there, but again, we've seen this throughout time through all of these games, right? And this kind of leads us to the Gamers Conundrum, if you will, right? We play these games because we're here as a hobby and ultimately to have fun, right? But to have fun, do we have to accept losing to people that have better tech? I mean, and there's an inherent problem with that is if you come in every day and you just get beat down, you're not having fun anymore, right? So at what point does that break, right? And of course, it's different for everybody, right? And this is, of course, probably perhaps the largest pitfall of our games. The top players are consistently going to play lists that everyone, oftentimes even themselves, despise just in order to game the game to get the tech advantage, which in of itself takes away from the game, right? I mean, if your deck is designed to push and break the rules of the game to get an advantage, are you even playing the game anymore, right? And that's just the choice that we all have to make, and I that's why a lot of these decks are despised. That's why a lot of these type of decks really have community fatigue in them, is they just get tired of seeing them over and over and over again because, at some point the tech can even outpower the player, right? So, and then to build onto that point, kind of my next question is, are IP-based games inherently, maybe not doomed, but are IP-based games more of a trap for this than non? And I think they are, right? And the reason I say that is, to have a Star Wars game or to have a Marvel game, it inherently it's attracting you to it's attracting players to come play that game because they want to play that IP, right? And if what ends up being the best is non-IP, which I think we can most agree, like in most of these competitive games, what ends up being the best is not necessarily related. I mean, it's still in the IP, but it's not. It's very rarely your iconic characters. It's very rarely within theme, right? It generally tends to be this hodgepodge where, in the case, like I was talking about Magic earlier, right? If you can use green ramp to get out your big red characters that are inherently lower costed because they don't have the ramp, then you have a really good potential synergy that doesn't necessarily fit in with theme, right? So that's kind of where I'm going here is we have to, as gamers, break these rules, but then if we are attracted to the game inherently because we want to play the theme and we want to play the game and not break the rules, doesn't there become kind of an inherent conundrum, inherent conflict there, right? So, I mean, this is what it is, right? Every game that I've ever played has had this, right? And come back to the IP discussion, right? Argent Saga, for example. I mean, it has a storyline, it has characters that are in there, but I don't know really anything about it, and I don't really care anything about it, right? So that's a game where I don't naturally have the inclination to play a certain thing. I'm more apt and more willing to go in and play the combos or whatever the high deck may be, because I don't necessarily I'm not emotionally attached, if you will, to those characters or to playing the elves or playing angels or whatever it may be, right? So then what is the answer for us as gamers, right? I mean, it really all just boils down to success criteria, right? That's what everything boils down to for us, right? What do you want to get out of it, right? Do you want to come in with the best tech and flex your brain muscles?
Yes, my brain is better than everybody's!
My brain is smarter than everyone's, right? Like, is that what you want to do? Then you're playing the competitive side. But that naturally means that you're maybe not going to get the same level of enjoyment or the same type of enjoyment as someone who's playing their favorite characters, right? So that's the trade that we all need to make, right? Do you want to play the game? Do you want to win the game, right? And at what point do those converge? At what point do they conflict? At what point do they diverge, right? But again, you have to know what your success criteria is going in, right? You don't have to, to play these games, you don't have to play them at a competitive level, right? But you also don't want to lose every single game either, right? So we get that. And an example on this, right? I went 8-0 at the Portland Regional playing Snoke, Rebel Trader, Sienna for Star Wars Destiny. It's just a random list, didn't really have any attachment to the characters. I did quite well in that tournament. I could play the technical stuff, but at the end of that tournament, I did not have any fun, right? So my success criteria was going and having fun. It was not winning the day, right? I mean, that's just for me. But for many others, it's the other way around, right? And that's why these games are so great, is they offer a lot of different challenges for basically whatever people want. So, I mean, that's really what it boils down to is, a lot of these games inherently have this problem. And I don't even know that we could say it's a problem, right? But this is something that's been present in every single game. It's going to continue to be present because IPs sell, right? The IPs bring people in to play the IP, and then they realize that the game isn't a Star Wars game. They realize that it's not necessarily it has their stuff in it, has their characters in there, and they can go out and buy the big dollar cards, but they're not necessarily at the big tournaments able to play Star Wars, right? They're just playing a card game, right? So, is that a trap that all these IP games are going to run into? And eventually, does that mean that all of the IP games are doomed for a shorter life than something like a Magic? I don't know. It's an interesting question. So those were just kind of my thoughts today. I find this very fascinating, the constant really battle even in myself versus these, do you play theme? Do you play Rulebreaker? And yeah, what I find is that I'll flip back and forth. Like, I'll find some cool synergy deck I like, and maybe it's got a 60% win rate. And if it drops to 30, maybe I swing back to some other non-technical deck, right? So again, you don't even have to be the same with your success criteria the whole time, right? So anyway, just something to think about as you approach these type of games. Again, thank you guys very much for joining me for the first ever Commando Chat. Just wanted to share some of my thoughts with you guys. If you are not yet a subscriber, make sure to like and subscribe. We appreciate that very much, helping us grow the channel. Thanks for joining me today, and go Commando. Thank you.